Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about watercolor paper sizing. When I was a beginner, I used to think that sizing had something to do with the size of the paper. I also had no idea that watercolor paper can spoil over time. Essentially, sizing is a substance that's applied to watercolor paper in order for us to be able to control the degree of absorbency of the paper. Imagine if you had to apply your watercolor paint to 100% cotton fabric or an old cotton shirt. The color would absorb directly into the fabric. You wouldn't be able to move the paint around on the top, and when dry, the color would be dull. That's why we have sizing, in order for us to be able to control the degree of absorbency of the paper. Today I'm going to cover all aspects of paper sizing. What is sizing? What is it made of? How do I know if my paper sizing is damaged? Can I fix my paper if the sizing is damaged? And how can I prevent my paper from its sizing becoming damaged? You get two types of paper sizing. The first is internal sizing. This is applied to the fibers of the paper during the manufacture process. The second is external sizing. This is painted on top of the paper once the paper manufacturing is complete. Now let's have a look at what is sizing made of. Traditionally, gelatine was used as the major sizing agent by most companies. You've got to watch out for papers that still use gelatine as their sizing agent. I've seen many sob stories on social media of people saying that their dogs have got hold of their pad of Arches watercolor paper and have decimated it. That is because Arches, along with some other companies like these ones on the screen now, still use gelatine as their sizing agent. Animals can smell the gelatine in the product, and therefore keep these papers away from your pets if you want to keep the paper safe. I've also seen on social media people often complaining about the smell of particularly Arches watercolor paper. I have to say, in my experience, I've never had any odor coming from my Arches watercolor paper or any of my other brands that use gelatine as their base. I don't know if it's something to do with the age of the paper, but I've never had that complaint over my paper. Next, you get plant-based sizing. This sizing is made of natural starches like potato or wheat. Next, you get synthetic sizing. These products are made in the laboratory, and their long scientific names are too long to list here. But it's important to note that both plant-based and synthetic sizings are both vegan-friendly, if that is a concern to you. These brands, as well as some others, are brands that use plant-based and/or synthetic sizing. I think it's important, if the use of animal-based products is something that's important to you, that you check each brand before you purchase it, because even within each company, different ranges use different sizings. So now, how do I know if the paper sizing is damaged? This is a block of paper that I bought at a 50% off sale. That should have been my first clue. So I know for a fact that the sizing on this paper is damaged. I've put a block on the left-hand side that I'm going to paint into, and then on the right-hand side I've taped a piece of paper whose sizing isn't damaged. So I'm going to start on the box that's got the good sizing and put some water down first. As I put the water down, you can see that the water stays on top, that there is a glisten to the water, and then there is a delay between me putting the water on the top and it sinking into the paper. I mean, we do want it to sink in the paper, but not immediately. Whereas the paper here with the damaged sizing, as soon as I put the water down, it seems to suck it straight in like a sponge. Here you can see from the side that the left-hand one has got a matte look and the right-hand one is still glistening. Even seconds later now, you can see how the left-hand side is completely absorbed and the right-hand side is still glistening. So let's add some color to the two now. I'm just going to add a bit of water to the good sizing, and then I'm going to drop my color straight in. I hardly had to add any extra water before putting my color down because it was still wet, and you can see that as I drop the color in, that the water spreads out nicely, it fills the block, and I'm easily able to blend the color from top to bottom. I've got enough time because the color is sitting on the top for a while to be able to shift it, move it around, add a bit more paint or water, and get an even blend from top to bottom. The left hand one here, I'm going to have to add quite a bit of water before I even start because it is completely absorbed. Just as quickly as I'm putting water down, it seems to be absorbing into the paper. But let me work quickly and pick up some color and see if I can get some down and blend it here. I am able to drop the color in, but I'm having to add water almost immediately because you can see that the color isn't blending throughout the water that I put down like the good sizing paper did. So I'm having to work quite hard here just to get the color to spread across, and the bottom here seems like it's completely dry. So I'm having to add some water, and you can see by this point now I can hardly shift the paint at all. I'm definitely not getting as smooth a blend as I did on the right hand side, and already the colors don't look as vibrant on the left as they do on the right. This is after about 20 seconds, and you can see that the good sizing, the color is still on top of the paper, whereas with the bad sizing it is already completely absorbed. And here, once it's dry, you can see that on the good sizing the color is a lot more vibrant, the blend is a lot more even, and how on the damaged sizing the color has bled out of the square box that I had drawn. And here's another sample of damaged sizing where when I turn it over, you can see that the color has bled the whole way through the paper through to the back. So, signs that sizing is damaged include the water doesn't stay on top of the paper, color sinks in immediately, dull colors, seepage, and splotchy washes. The causes of sizing damage come about as a result of the fact that all sizing materials are water soluble. So paper subjected to high humidity will cause the sizing to break down and dissolve quickly. Hot climates can cause the breakdown of the protein bonds inside the sizing and cause it to become damaged. The older your paper, the more chance it is to be susceptible to these. And also, overworking your painting can cause the sizing to become damaged. So now the question is, can we repair damaged paper sizing? If we are, we're going to have to apply some sort of external sizing because there's nothing we can do about the internal sizing of the paper. Most watercolor brands offer something in the form of paper sizing medium. Today I'm going to use a homemade sizing that I have made, as well as Daniel Smith watercolor ground. The watercolor ground comes in a variety of different colors: white, transparent, black, and others. This is the transparent medium. So now I'm going to paint on these sizing options in the labeled boxes that I've set aside for them. The first one is my homemade sizing that I made from gelatin. I will make an entirely separate video, and I will put the link in the description box below, as well as a link at the end of this video as to how I made this homemade sizing. It has sat overnight, and as a result the gelatin inside has set, so it's a little bit jelly-like. That's okay. I'm going to use my normal watercolor brush because the gelatin is water soluble, and I'm going to apply it over the box. I'm going to spread it evenly, and I'm also going to go outside and beyond the lines of the box just to see if I can also stop the spreading of the watercolor which happened with the damaged sizing. Then I'll close that up and then use the Daniel Smith watercolor ground. Even though this is the transparent one, when I open the lid it looks white, but nonetheless when I apply it down onto the page you can see that I can still see the lines through, and it does dry transparent. This medium is also water soluble, as any watercolor sizing option will be, so I can gladly put it down with my watercolor brush and it will rinse off easily with water when I'm done. Once I've got both of these sizing options down, I'm going to allow them to dry completely before I come back and test them. These have both dried completely now, so I'm going to test them. I'm going to start with the homemade sizing and put some water down first. The first thing that I see is that the water does now start to sit nicely on top of the paper and doesn't sink in immediately. And then when I start to put the paint down, I can also see that it doesn't absorb completely into the paper like it did before. I've got plenty of time in order to be able to move the paint around, and I'm able to get a much more even blend than I did before. It's still wet enough when I come and I want to make the top part more concentrated in color. I'm able to add the color at the top without there being any streaking or lines, and I'm able to get an even blend of the color from top to bottom. Let me try the Daniel Smith watercolor ground now. When I put the water down, I also see here that the water doesn't absorb immediately like it did when the sizing was damaged. And I'm also able to get a much more even blend of the color from top to bottom than I did before. I'm not getting any lines or streaking, but I must say that I think that the blend was easier to obtain with the homemade sizing than with the watercolor ground. As I add more color at the top with the watercolor ground, I'm still able to get a nice even blend from top to bottom. So I'm interested to let these dry and then see what they look like once completely dry. Now that everything is dry, I am particularly thrilled with the results of the homemade sizing. I would say the results with this are comparable to the paper with good sizing and much improved on the paper with damaged sizing. I would say the same thing about the watercolor ground. It's vastly improved on what it was before. And I would say that the results between the homemade sizing and the watercolor ground are comparable, but the homemade sizing is infinitely cheaper to make. So how do we prevent damage to the sizing of our paper? Firstly, I would suggest that you always buy new paper and be wary of sales. And because we know that heat and humidity are the biggest enemies of our sizing, we want to try and mitigate that as much as possible. I have both heat and humidity challenges in Thailand, so I always keep my paper in a cool room and I turn on the air conditioner if it gets too hot. Then every single one of my watercolor paper blocks gets stored in a plastic bag. I plug the helpful holes in the bag with stickers so that air can't get in, and I purchase these dehumidifier sachets. When I put the dehumidifier sachet inside the bag, I make sure that the plastic side faces the paper because the paper side can get wet and then damage your watercolor paper block. As proof that these dehumidifier sachets really do work, here's one that has been inside this bag for a few months now. You can see how much water it has absorbed, and I'm going to chuck it away and replace it with a new one. I hope that you found this video interesting and that you learned something new about watercolor paper sizing and how to care for your paper. If you would like to watch the video on how I made the homemade sizing, you can click the box on the top right of your screen now. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. Until next time, bye for now.